honestly think this could be some of the biggest news of the Imsa offseason. And no, it's not about a new manufacturer joining the grid, although the recent Hyundai announcement was pretty big, and McLaren actually confirming a car being in the works would also be pretty huge. But I think it's this week's off-season test that's going to give us a huge look into the 2025 season and what the remainder of the off-season will look like. First though, let's talk about the test that's actually taking place. These off-season tests are regularly conducted by Imsa once the season is completed. At last year's off-season test, it helped us set up the BOP for this year, while at the same time giving us the first glimpse at some of the new cars that were coming ahead of this year. While a couple of seasons ago, there was an off-season test right after the season finale that gave us our first glance at the GTP cars that were set to start in the 2023 season. Now this year's off-season test, which will still be followed up by the Roar Before the 24 in January, was not a mandatory one for the teams or the manufacturers. But despite it not being mandatory, there is a very healthy 31 entries slated to take to the track, and amongst those 31 entries, there's plenty to talk about. Let's start with arguably the biggest highlight though, and that's the presence of the Aston Martin Valkyrie. The car, which is set to debut in Imsa and the World Endurance Championship in 2025, was a question mark as to whether it would be attending the test. In fact, just a couple of months ago, the Heart of Racing team principal Ian James indicated to Sportscar 365 that it was still the goal when asked as to whether the team would be attending the Imsa sanctioned test. That goal has clearly been met, and what it means is that the Valkyrie will take to the track at Daytona about a month after it completed a successful test at Road Atlanta in the wake of Petit Le Mans. And with the car now being present at an Imsa sanctioned test, it also means that we get a list of a few drivers that will be present in the car. Now, there are no big surprises in this Aston Martin Thor entry. Yes, that is actually what it is listed as on the entry grid. It's still a very strong group of veteran Heart of Racing drivers: Ross Gunn, Alex Riberas, Roman DeAngelis, all drivers that have significant experience with Aston Martin as well as with the Heart of Racing are going to be driving that car this week. And while the presence of this car on the entry grid is by no means a guarantee that the car will be present at the Rolex 24 in January, I personally see the Valkyrie being present for this Imsa sanction test as a huge step in the right direction and a big checkbox that needed to be checked in order for the Valkyrie to be present on the Rolex 24 grid. Of course, it was not mandatory for the Valkyrie to be at this test, but I think if the Valkyrie was not going to be present at this test, that it would be a pretty big long shot for us to see it ready for the Imsa season opener. Now before we move on, I just want to quickly tell you about the S's newsletter. Here I send you everything you need to know in a quick and easy read before every Imsa race weekend. It's completely free and I'm pretty excited about some of the stuff that I'm working on for it this off season. So if you want to check that out and make sure that you don't miss the next one, you can head to offtheS's.com or click that first link in the description. Now the Valkyrie has been followed quite closely in recent weeks, but another car that's seen a lot of time in the news cycle is the Lamborghini SC63. The car is facing the potential of not being on the WEC grid in 2025, and with that, there's been a number of questions that have been brought up with it. If the car's not on the grid in the World Endurance Championship, could we see Lamborghini convert that Michelin Endurance Cup only entry in Imsa to a full season entry? Or even could we see an additional full season entry added to the Imsa grid to go along with their Michelin Endurance Cup entry? I mean, at this time, we simply just don't know, and I'm not really here to speculate on it either. However, with Imsa also teasing during the State of the Sport weekend at one more elusive, exciting full season entry that could be added to the grid, I think we can all hope that this might be it. However, what we do know is that the SC63 will be present at this, again, non-mandatory Imsa sanction test, and we'll see drivers Romain Grosjean and Andrea Caldarelli behind the wheel. During the test, they will look to take a critical and much needed step forward with the Lamborghini SC63 as it heads into its very first Rolex 24. Alright, now new cars always grab some of the spotlight, but one of the things with this test that's really exciting to see is some of the drivers that are being listed on the entry list for this test. Now, one team that previously had a big question mark above them as to what car they would be running in 2025 is AO Racing. The 2024 GTD Pro champions, and whether it was legitimate or not, had a big question surrounding whether they were going to be returning to Porsche equipment next year. And while the team did shut down many of these rumors virtually as soon as they came out, it does appear that the team is confirmed to be on the grid for this test with a Porsche once again, and Klaus Bachler and Tom Sargent behind the wheel. It should be noted that Lauren Heinrich is unavailable as he will be racing in the GT3 race in Macau. But another former AO driver has seemingly found a new home, as Multimatic factory driver Seb Prio will be testing in the number 64 Ford Mustang. Seb, of course, took a step back from the AO racing effort midway through the 2024 season to focus on his Multimatic factory efforts. I think it's no surprise to see him behind the wheel of one of these Mustangs here in the test. Whether or not this actually translates to a full season ride for Seb remains to be seen, but man oh man, I think he'd have to be a pretty darn strong candidate to land one of those Ford rides. Editor Stu here, he did indeed land one of those full season rides with Ford. We'll talk a little bit more about that in an upcoming video. We're also going to see one of the most successful and well-known drivers from Imsa's GTP class behind the wheel of a GT this week, as Pipo Derani will be behind the wheel of the DXDT Racing Corvette. The team, which recently confirmed that Sally Yalich, Charlie Eastwood, and Alec Udell will pilot the car for Michelin Endurance Cup events, with a separate set of drivers getting behind the wheel for the Sprint Cup events. But that's not where I could see Pipo Derani fitting into the picture here. With it rumored that Pipo's looking to European rides for next season, I think that it would make a ton of sense for Pipo to jump into this car as a potential fourth driver for the Rolex. Now, despite Pipo being a platinum driver, the already established combination of the gold-rated Charlie Eastwood and the silver-rated Udell and Yalich would still mean that the group of them would be legal under the GTD regulations. I think this would be a really nice fit for Pipo, and honestly, I just hope we see Pipo on the grid for the Rolex 24 in one form or another, even if he's racing in Europe next year. And then we have a bit of a new old look for the Iron Dames. 2024 was a difficult campaign for the Iron Dames, only salvaging a single finish better than 15th. But a switch in their driver lineup is not the only big change that's coming for this season. 2025 will see their Michelin Endurance Cup campaign be behind the wheel of a Porsche as they switch from the Lamborghini that they ran last season. They've already done some testing with the car over in Europe, and now it looks like they will continue their testing over in North America at this IMSA sanctioned test. Claudio Scavoni, Matteo Crasoli, Rahel Frey, and Karen Gaillard are set to make laps in the test. Now I'm just scratching the surface here with some of the news that's come out of just this entry list being released for the test. Things like Van de Stur Racing are looking set to make their IMSA WeatherTech debut. Veterans like Sebastian Bourdais are going to be at the test as well, albeit with a brand new team. And there's so much more, but as we wait for more developments to emerge over the course of this offseason, you can check out this video that breaks down all of the confirmed full season and Michelin Endurance Cup entries that we'll see on next year's IMSA grid. A huge shout out to all of the channel supporters. If you too want to support the show, you can head to patreon.com/offinthes or click that join button below. Once again though, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.